This is my case study on the Bel Air Police Department operations. I chose the Bel Air Police Department because it is located near my house, and I also have a good relationship with a lot of the officers that work there, including the Chief of Police, the Lieutenant, and the Sergeant. This is just a brief agenda and a look at what I'm going to be covering today. I'm going to introduce the Bel Air Police Department, and then I'm going to look at what I measured from their operations. I also plan on benchmarking these operations to the Wichita Police Department, and then looking at some of the problems that I found in the Bel Air Police Department and how to correctly solve those problems. The Bel Air Police Department is located in Bel Air, Kansas, and covers about 6.76 square miles. The department is run by Chief Daryl Atterbury, and he is in charge of all the overall operations. However, he is supported by Lieutenant Fox and Sergeant Davis. Lieutenant Fox is in charge of most of the day-to-day operations and outranks the sergeant. However, he only works on first shift normally. Sergeant Davis is a new addition and works on both second shift and third shift as the nighttime supervisor. In looking at how I was going to measure these operations, both for the Bel Air Police Department and the Wichita Police Department, I decided to email both departments. I have a personal connection with the lieutenant with the Bel Air Police Department, and so I emailed him and got a response from him very quickly. While I emailed the Wichita Police Department and got confirmation of the email, the sergeant that was supposed to email me back has not done so yet. However, I have personal experience with both departments on ride-alongs and interactions at various events throughout my time studying both departments, and also there are statistics found online that I use for both departments. One thing I'd like to address concerning the marketing and sales operations, since the Bel Air Police Department is a public service, it's not for profit, so there really is no marketing or sales departments. However, they do use social media to get their image out there, and community policing is a big part of that. The community policing is when officers get out into the community and listen to the community's concerns, and it also allows the community to interact with officers in a positive light. A platform that is done nationally is called National Night Out. It happens usually once a year in August, where the community gets together in a party type of format with law enforcement and other emergency services. Some of the things I'll be measuring include how long it takes to hire a new officer, training hours required per year, the square miles per officer at each shift, the amount of time spent between the start of shift and actual patrolling, and how many officers there are per vehicle. These are important figures because if a city is in need of an officer, it may take a long time until the officer is finally on the streets patrolling because of the extensive interviewing process and the amount of time it will take them to go through the police academy and excess training. Additional training hours every year are pertinent to officers keeping themselves safe, while also being able to serve the communities better that they are employed to protect and serve. These training classes usually include active shooter drills, crisis response training, dealing with the mentally challenged individuals, and de-escalation tactics. It is also important for a department to have enough officers that they can properly serve their city and communities well, which is why I'm looking at how many square miles there are per officer at each shift. Looking at how long it takes an officer to start patrolling after their shift start is an important figure because the time they spend getting ready for their shift and after their shift begins is the amount of time that there isn't an officer on the streets protecting the community. Well, knowing how many officers have to share a vehicle isn't that big of a deal when it comes to protecting the community or choosing where to work. It is a comfort and a preference issue if multiple officers are having to change the layout of the same vehicle every day, or if you have to share your vehicle with another officer on the same shift. The process for hiring a new officer is a very lengthy process. It takes at least 34 to 35 weeks for someone to apply, be accepted, and then become a full-time officer that's able to patrol the streets by themselves. So it takes nearly 9 months of training, interviewing, and investigating for them to become an officer. New recruits have to pass agility tests along with mental tests before completing a 70-page questionnaire that's turned into the detective. Once the detective gets the packet, he conducts his investigation on that questionnaire. If the applicant is successful in passing that investigation, They will then be given temporary employment status from the Bel Air Police Department, and then must go through several more tests and review boards before they are even allowed to be sent to the police academy, which lasts about 14 weeks. After passing the academy, there are several weeks of field training where the recruit has to apply what they learned in the academy in the field with a field training officer or an FTO from all 3 shifts. Once their field training is over, they receive recommendations from FTOs, from the lieutenant, and they present that to the chief of police. If the lieutenant and the chief review the recommendation and believe that the officer is allowed to perform the duties by themselves, then they are allowed to have a car and they are given full employment status. However, if the chief and the lieutenant decide that the officer needs more training, it could take even longer than the 34 to 35 weeks. Preparation time is key because it's important for officers to be on the road as soon as possible from the beginning of their shift. If they're not, then it's just more time where there aren't officers present, especially in Bel Air where they do not have overlapping shifts. According to the lieutenant, the officers are supposed to arrive about 15 minutes early to be ready, which includes making sure they have all their gear, their laptops are working properly, and they talk to the chief and check in with the lieutenant. Unfortunately, this rarely happens, and so it takes officers anywhere from 15 minutes to over an hour to start patrolling the streets. Part of these reasons could be they have technology issues. Radios could malfunction, but most likely what would happen are the laptops would go down. And this, unfortunately, happens to be a pretty common event. I've seen it happen plenty of times when I'm going on ride-alongs where the laptop that they keep in their cars and then bring into the office just aren't working for some reason. And sometimes it could take just 5 minutes of restarting the computer or an hour of handing it over to the IT guy to have it fixed. Another couple of reasons for why it could take so long for a patrol to start is they may have people that walk into the police station that have concerns that they have to deal with, and also the chief might hand out special assignments to members of the force. The Bel Air Police Department requires officers to follow state guidelines in regards to training policy. This means that officers must complete 40 hours of training every year, along with firearms testing each year. However, the Bel Air Police Department also requires that their officers test on firearms quarterly to ensure proficiency on all weapons carried by the Bel Air Police Department officers, which also includes their off-duty weapons. The Bel Air Police Department covers about 6.67 square miles, and so taking a look at just how many square miles per officer is necessary to know just about how many officers there are on the road and about how much area they have to cover on average. Obviously, they don't cover just that amount of miles, but just it's nice to see how much roadway or how much area an officer has to cover. First shift has 2 patrol officers and then 5 total officers. They have administrative officers and the chief of police, the lieutenant, and the detective on first shift. So if we're only looking at patrol officers, each has to cover about 3.4 square miles, but all 5 total officers can cover about 1.3 square miles. Second and third shift have a half officer because the sergeant starts about 4 hours into second shift and then continues only 4 hours into third shift. So I counted him as half an officer for each shift. So looking at second shift, there's about 2.5 patrol officers, and they have to cover about 2.7 square miles each. And then third shift only has 1.5 patrol officers, and they have to cover about 4.4 square miles each. They have a guy that's in the academy right now that will be headed into third shift, so it'll soon be the 2.7 square miles also. When we look at officers per vehicle, it's not as big of a deal, but it is also nice to know how many officers have to share a vehicle. Thankfully, with Bel Air, normally just one officer has to be in a vehicle per shift, unless you have FTOs, your field training officers, with a recruit. Also, most vehicles are used every shift. An exception to that would be the chief of police's vehicle that he takes home with him. I chose the Wichita Police Department to benchmark the Bel Air Police Department since the Wichita Police Department is located near Bel Air, Kansas. It's a larger organization, but they also deal with a lot of the same crimes and same people. The three things that I wanted to look at to compare with the Bel Air Police Department would be the amount of time needed to hire a new officer, the square miles per officer at each shift, and then the amount of time spent between the start of shift and actual patrolling. WPD has a lot of similar procedures to the hiring process. One of the main differences is that they have their own training facility that they share with the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office, so their academy is more focused on Wichita, Kansas, rather than a broad focus on how to correctly police in general. Their academy also lasts a few weeks longer because it is specific to Wichita. Looking at the square miles per officer at each shift, according to their staffing report that WPD had done in 2017, they had 85 patrol officers for first shift, 59 for second shift, 80 for third shift, and 83 for fourth shift. Wichita is about 160.6 square miles, so this means that there are 1.9 square miles per patrol officer for first shift, 2.7 for second shift, 2.0 for third shift, and 1.9 for fourth shift. These numbers are fairly close to the Bel Air Police Department in square miles per officer at each shift. There may be a few shifts where Wichita has a better square miles per officer or Bel Air has a better one. The one where Bel Air has the least leverage would be their third shift, which would be the third shift and fourth shift for Wichita PD. That's because they only have one officer right now. But for the most part, they're really close in square miles per officer at each shift. However, looking at the amount of time spent between the start of shift and actual patrolling, WPD starts each shift with a meeting between the supervisor, which is usually a sergeant, and the incoming shift. This meeting's in depth, but it rarely takes more than half an hour. Immediately after the meeting lets out, the officers go to their cars, inspect their equipment, and are out on the road within a couple of minutes. Also, since Wichita PD has overlapping shifts, this is an even smaller problem because there are always officers patrolling Wichita even when one shift ends and a new shift begins.
This is the problem that I looked at for Bel Air PD, just because the start of shift times are even more crucial since their shifts are not overlapping, and it also seems as though it takes longer for their officers to get on the road. My solution is for those that are in administrative or higher ranking roles to encourage officers to show up early again, upgrade equipment. Part of the reason that they're not getting on the road as fast is because their radios and laptops aren't working. So looking at that situation, they need to probably upgrade their equipment because WPD doesn't have nearly as many issues as Bel Air PD does. If there are any special assignments, have those meetings prior to the start of shift instead of after the start of shift, because that allows for officers to be distracted as they're trying to get to their cars. Also, the supervisors need to show initiative. Both the lieutenant and the sergeant should show up earlier as well, just to set the tone, and then they should start enforcing showing up early for all the officers.
Was my evaluation of the Bel Air Police Department and their operations. It was a lot of fun just getting to talk to the lieutenant from Bel Air, and while I wasn't able to receive that email from the Wichita Police Department, I look forward to reading that email whenever it comes in from the sergeant and being able to apply it to the knowledge that I've already gained from the Bel Air Police Department. Anyway, this is my case study for the Bel Air Police Department.